Welcome, listeners, one and all. This is Santos Bonacci, and I'm very elated and happy to be able to present a weekly show here on People for People Radio, and to give syncretism a residency so that all to do with syncretism may be expounded here or somewhere where people can go to on a weekly basis, rather other than just the my channel and YouTube channel, etc. So I'm really happy about that. I was doing a residency here years ago in 2012 and 13 when it was Scottish Sovereigns Radio, and my friendship with Gary goes way back to the very beginning. So it's been quite a journey since then, and we have done a few shows in between, so that was good. And to some of the fine guests, including today's wonderful and stellar historical guest that we have lined up, and appropriately the first one in a whole series of great ones to come. I've already got guests booked out till the end of March, and I've only just announced this last week. So what I endeavour to do with this show when I don't have guests is just deal with all truth themes that are important, whether it's health, whether it's dealing with sovereignty and astrotheology, philosophy, etc. So I hope to be able to share the richest of information, knowledge and wisdom, and make it a venue for all people who are advancing their path and who are living in truth and wishing to have blessings in their life by walking on the correct path. So as a lover of knowledge that I am, and the guests that I have being such a great studious researcher of knowledge and being able to share it so wonderfully with the world. And this is sort of, this warms my heart to be able to say this for my mother, because my mother is one of Jordan Maxwell's greatest listeners, I would say. She absolutely delights in hearing the way he teaches the truth, and also we have that similar background of the Jehovah's Witnesses, etc. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce my beautiful friend and great truther, Jordan Maxwell. How are you, brother?
Oh, thank you so very much for having me on and for reminding to remember me, because I very truly love being on the radio with you. And I think you and I have started something on this earth that is now finally catching on. People are starting to finally decide to look into what they believe and why they believe it and where it all came from. And Santos, when I first saw your material, when I first watched some of the stuff you were doing years ago, I was so struck by this is exactly what I wanted to do with what you were doing. I wanted to talk about the foundations of Western civilization, its religion, its governmental systems, and the way we live on the earth in relation to what we believe and we think we know. And I am now convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that the human race, the human family on the earth is speeding toward some kind of a terrible tragedy. And there's too many of us who have no idea in the world what's going on, and we're very easily led, and the people who are in power they understand how to manipulate the masses of millions of people who do not know what's going on. They know how to do that, and that's scary. That's frightening to me, because what you're talking about is an ultimate world guided by communism, Marxist-Leninist socialism, in which the whole human race will not be allowed to think, or question anything. And that's what I'm seeing now, and I'm fighting of it. It's very scary.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think it's very important for you and I to be on the radio together.
Yeah, for sure. And
I really appreciate your work and what you've done to enlighten the world. I mean, you blew my mind. I thought I understood astrotheology until I started listening to you. And then the more I began to see the history of what I was seeing and what I knew and what I was experiencing, it all began to make sense. And so I've been listening to your work for years, Santos, and I really loved listening to you.
Thank you, brother. Likewise. You set me on the right leads from the very beginning, back in 2007, 2008, where I discovered you, and they were the leads I needed. If I didn't have those, I wouldn't have got the information so quickly and so efficiently. But I took all the leads that you suggested, bought all the books, and read them and studied them.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting the way the Great Spirit in the universe guides people's lives, because I was guided to do what I do and to be who I am, and I now look at that and I see that at 80 years old, I now look back on my life and see that I was being guided, because when I was in the cult of Jehovah's Witnesses, the people were very nice. I have nothing against the people, but the organizational leaders and the elders of the congregation, the people who were leading that entire world organization, were so profoundly corrupt. I could not believe it. They would say one thing and strictly do another, go the opposite way. And if I tried to point out something that they were doing which was wrong, I'm the one that was disfellowshipped. I'm the one that was being cast out. And they told me the reason why I was being disfellowshipped is because I was not showing proper respect for the anointed ones. And I said, what do you mean anointed ones? And they told me, that's us. The elders here in the congregation, we have been put here by God, and you're not showing proper respect for us. And I thought to myself, my God, have I heard this argument before? My God, this is incredible that they would actually put themselves in this position of being all-encompassing, the only holders of truth, and if you don't buy into what they're saying, then you are against God. Where have I heard this kind of lunacy before? And so I began to suspect that something was terribly wrong. And then when I began to do my outside research, and I was really in the middle of a terrible place in my life where I was finally beginning to awaken to the fact that what I was involved in was a profoundly evil cult. And then I found information tying Charles Taze Russell to a world Masonic society that was operating around the earth to promote a new world coming, a new world order. And then when I found that information, it opened up the doors to a whole world of research that today would just blow you away. If you could see all the stuff I've collected showing that the Jehovah's Witnesses are being organized, directed, financed, and directed by secret societies out of Europe and England and the British Israel World Federation, the Masonic orders, which are in the hands of the Jesuits. It's absolutely an incredible case of treason against the human family. taking people who are, who are really wanting to do what is right and wanting to believe in truth, and then taking that and spinning a story so that they will believe it. And then when they find out, no, these people are nothing but criminals at the very top. I mean, I should have known something was wrong when the organization was home office in Brooklyn, New York. My God, is there anyone on the earth that does not know that Brooklyn, New York is the home of organized crime? My God, all over the world, people in organized crime know Brooklyn, New York is the center for all international organized criminality. And here was Jehovah's Witnesses founded their organization and moved it into Brooklyn, New York. And it's really quite a story as to who they really are and what this organization really is. And I have many friends in the governing body and at the top of that organization. And they would come back to visit. And when they came, we would go out to dinner, and they would sit and tell me all kinds of off-the-wall stuff that's going on at Bethel. And then when I found out what the word Bethel meant, it's really extraordinary story of stuff that people just do not know. And in the Bible, in the Old Testament, I think it was Jacob who we're told fell asleep and laid his head on a stone, and he had dreams about the ladder to heaven. And when he woke up, he said he set the stone up and as a memorial to God, and he said, here in this stone, God is present. So we're told that the Bible, Jacob slept on a stone, and the next morning after his wonderful dream, he said that God was in this stone, and so that's the God of Jacob. Well, then we find out that stone is a phallic stone, and that he was pouring liquid over that stone, and there's pictures in the Jewish reference works about Jacob pouring the offering over this stone, which was an upright phallic symbol. And so that phallic symbol became known in Hebrew as the house of God, or the Bethel stone. And so Bethel, Jehovah's Witness main headquarters is called Bethel, and Bethel is the house of God, and that sounds wonderful until go back and look at the Jewish encyclopedia and see the Bethel is actually a phallic stone with a male penis in erection. And that's what the word, and so they call that phallic stone the Bethel stone. And so I'm thinking to myself, that's an appropriate term that Jehovah's Witnesses would use, a Bethel, because it represents the most basis of thinking. And then I found out, then I began to see that modern day Christianity itself is based on ancient sex worship coming out of the Middle East, going back maybe 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. The development of sexual religions in the Middle East gave us today what we call Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All three can be traced back to Hindu. All three are based on sex worship and the stars, symbol sex in the stars. It's really quite a story that you have told so well, Santos, in explaining where these belief systems have come from. But this explains why there's so much sexuality in Christianity and the Catholic Church, in Judaism, the Jews, and the use of pornography in New York. My God, what a story there it is to tell the world. And we need to wake up to see that we've been misled. And And then when I discovered that the Holy Father, the Pope is called the Holy Father. Why? Because he connects us with God. So therefore he is the Roman Godfather. They make movies about people like him called Godfather. This is why so many top mafiosi gangsters of organized crime are found in the Catholic Church, Chicago, New York, and when they die or when they've been killed or assassinated, they have big, enormous Catholic funerals, and all the clergy are there to officiate over the funerals of the Godfathers and all the mafiosi gangsters that are killed in organized crime. So I'm just saying it's really quite a story when you find out that the government you live under is not what you thought it was. The religion you belong to is not what you thought it was. And the whole world around you does not operate the way you think it does. Nothing is for sure. Nothing is telling you. There's nowhere in the world humans are going to find the truth. It's just an incredible situation we find ourselves in. And I think people like yourself, Santos, were spiritually brought to us, because when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And you appeared on the scene just about the time I was feeling the whole world is tired of being lied to and tricked and deceived, and then it popped up on the scene, the teacher. Because when the students are ready, the teacher will appear. And your material was earth-shaking as far as I'm concerned. The material that you talked about how the religions of the Western world developed, it's really quite an extraordinary story, and that's why I'm always delighted to be on the show with you, because I think you are one of the very important people that have opened up the world to what's actually going on and inspire people like me to continue. So thank you again for having me on the show, Santos.
Oh, my pleasure, brother. My pleasure. I think about you all the time because your words, when you speak them, they're clear. They're very clear. You can't be ambiguous about what you're saying. You can't misunderstand it. And it rings for so long. So everything I discover, it sort of rings back in a harmonic back to you. And oh yeah, that's what Jordan said once. I remember that. Yeah. So as the great Antonius, the Antonine Emperor of Rome, who wrote Meditations, said, "What you do ripples in eternity." So
well, that's the truth.
Yeah, it is appropriate that we speak the truth, because then the truth will go forth on the waters, and
yep.
Whoever will receive it and benefit, and whoever will not, well, let's hope and pray that one day they will receive that truth, because the scriptures say you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free from all limitations, including lies, which are limitations. So long live the truth, brother, and I'm so glad that that I know you and your work, and that you're still with us, and still strong, and still preaching the same truth, and to awaken people. So that's
well, I just do what I do, and I have become aware, and I have now begun to see the obvious, and that is that you and I are a particular kind of people, but most people do not want to know. But when you really want to know, and you don't mind putting yourself out for years of experiences to look at things that other people don't see and don't want to know about, you find out that we, the people who are bending toward the truth, are not doing so because they want to. It's because the Spirit is pulling you toward itself. I don't believe that we as humans decide we want to do this and we want to know that and we want to understand the truth. I think it is rather that the Spirit is connecting itself to you and pulling you and guiding you and inspiring you to want to know the truth. And so that's why, we say things like, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Basically, that means when you are finally ready to listen, and there's no one on the earth will know when that is except the Spirit in the universe. It will know when you're ready. And when you're ready to really understand the truth and accept the truth, then it will be given to you, and you will. That's why there's a difference, a world of difference between being a disciple and an apostle. Disciple means that you are studying the discipline of a teacher. And so you're studying his discipline and disciplining yourself to understand what he's saying. So you are a discipline or a disciple. But an apostle means, it's a Greek word which means one who is called out, implying that an apostle is one that does not look for the teacher, but the teacher looks for the student. And so I think what we're doing now is that we're all being led by the Spirit to perceive the truth. And so, and therefore, people who are listening to us now, I don't believe are happen by chance to be listening. They are listening because they're supposed to hear. They're supposed to hear, and they're supposed to wake up. And I think that that's been the whole situation from day one, is that it does not depend on us. It depends on the Spirit in the universe. If it wants you to know, you will know. If it doesn't want you to know, you won't. And the reason why it decides one way or the other about you is because it knows your spirit. It knows your heart. And the Spirit, I totally believe in. The concept of God or being led by Holy Spirit, I totally believe that there is some kind of a higher spiritual force in the universe that picks you. You don't pick it. I mean, you don't, when you're going in the military, you don't tell the military what you're going to do. The military tells you what you're going to do. And so that's the way it works in the spirit world. You don't just decide you're going to do this and you're going to do that. You're going to study this and you're going to understand this or that. No. It is given to you by the Spirit. You are being led. Therefore, we come up with the word inspire. You're being inspired to read and study and help your fellow man to grow. And that's what I see you and I are trying to do, is trying to awaken in our fellow man the desire to know the real truth, what it's actually based on. And again, that's why I think it's very appropriate that you and I should be doing this particular program at this particular time. There's no doubt in my mind we're supposed to be doing it.
Yeah, same with me, for sure. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done properly. When I first started doing videos, I was watching everyone else and pleased with all of the revelations that were coming to me. But I realized that I had something that probably wasn't being shared, the way to interrelate and connect and syncretize all things. So although I didn't want to put my face out there, I wasn't looking too healthy at the time, and I was very skinny, and I thought, oh no, how do I do this? I was trying to work out ways of getting syncretism out the way I could see it, because I realized that my perspective, for some reason, it was different to anyone else's. And
what was it?
Yeah. And so, but I did anyway. I just thought, no, I've got to put my face through it. So I just got out there and I released my first video today, January 8th, 9 years ago, 2011, my very first video on YouTube, Mr. Astrotheology, on this day 9 years ago. So I'm in the ninth heaven.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's historical for that reason, and that I'm talking to you, Jordan, probably my greatest inspiration, I would say, not only because of the great content and all of the wisdom and all of the truth that I learned, but the way you did it clearly. And this is why my mother loved listening to you, because she said, all the others just speak over your head. Jordan speaks to your heart. You know, you can understand him. And my mother's an immigrant from Italy, Calabria.
Wow.
She came when
what an honor to be having that said. It was such an honor, and I really appreciate that comment, because that's really what I want. That's really what I want. I don't want to, talk like a talking head and to just wear a suit and buy into this whole system of communication we on the earth have been developed for us to lead us. I don't like that kind of communication at all. I want to be able to strike at the heart of people. I want to be able to talk with people legitimately and be able to move them spiritually and emotionally. I am not trying to be a newscaster or a movie star. I'm a teacher. And I love teaching people. And now I've come to the point where that's the best way to live as far as I'm concerned. I paid a terrible price. As you probably know, I paid a terrible price to be a teacher in a class that nobody has been able to do for thousands of years, is to wake the world up to the conspiratorial apparatus which guides the human family. And so I've had to pay a price for it. I didn't realize how much of a price it's going to cost you. But, I've had teachers explain to me, if you want to know a little something about a subject, well, then go look for it. Go to the library, read a book, or ask questions. Unless you really want to know a lot more important information about the subject you're interested in, well, you can always take a night classes or go to a college or junior college or something and take classes on the subject. But that'll take you time and money and effort. Unless, of course, you are really struck with the subject and really want to know it professionally, well, then it's going to cost you some real money and some serious time. If you're going to go to a full university and study this subject and come out with a PhD on the subject, that's going to cost you a lot of money and time and effort. The cost is going to be incredible. But if you are sincerely locked into wanting the truth of the universe, you have no idea what you're doing. You're going to be locked into some kind of an incredible experience that's going to cost you everything you cannot imagine. It may cost you your life ultimately. It will cost you your family. So depending on how much you want to know is how much you're going to pay. And I've learned that. So I don't mind paying as I have all my life, because I do know things today that most people will never be privy to know. I've been in the company of extraordinary people and learned things that I would never be allowed to know normally. But because I don't mind paying the price and I've already done it, I am now allowed to see things that I've been told things by people that I happened by chance to meet, never realizing who they were. And I've had so many experiences, Santos, that just will blow your mind. Some of the stuff that's happened to me is just extraordinary. So, again,
I remember one of those things that happened to you. A couple of years back, we had an interview where you revealed that you had conversations with the treasury people at the Jehovah's Witnesses headquarters, and they revealed to you that they had open checkbooks to 2 banks. You want to share that?
Yep. That was in Woodland Hills in Los Angeles, Woodland Hills out in the valley. And there was a special conference for Jehovah's Witnesses. It was one of the real special privileges to be invited to this big conference. And afterwards, the governing body, there were 3 or 4 members. I think there were 4 members of the governing body. And they all decided to go out to dinner after the session was over. They all decided to go out to dinner. Well, one of them was a Greek on the governing body, and I knew him well, and he knew me. But he had a grandson who was my dear friend of mine, who was a Greek young witness. And so the governing body, the Greek man on the governing body, asked his nephew if he wanted to come along to the dinner. And so obviously yes. And so the young man was my friend. He invited me to go too. And so we went out to dinner with 4 members of the governing body, along with the circuit overseer and the district overseer and all these other head men that were running the organization. And at dinner, they began talking about all kinds of things that they were doing, what they were properties that they were buying around the world, and so I introduced the fact. I said, I have a question. I said to this one official, young man who was the chief, what am I trying to say, the chief accountant for the Watchtower Society, the guy who controls the money in New York for Jehovah's Witnesses. And he was there at dinner with us with the governing body. And I said to him, I said, you know, in the yearbook, I am reading that the Watchtower Society spent 190 some odd millions of dollars this past year on buying properties around the world and buying printing presses and shipping materials to different countries to build corporate headquarters and new buildings for the Watchtower Society around the world, and all of this is costing almost $200 million. And I said to him, I said, I live in Los Angeles, in a very affluent place in Los Angeles in Woodland Hills. This is where movie stars and lots of important people all live here in Southern California. And I said, and the Watchtower Society and the Jehovah's Witnesses Kingdom Halls here can hardly pay their rent, and sometimes our utilities are off because we didn't have the money to pay for the utilities. And I said, so if we live in the most affluent area in Los Angeles and we're having trouble keeping our lights on and paying our rent, where is the Watchtower Society getting almost $200 million in cash to buy properties and printing presses all over the world? Where are they getting this money from? Because we're doing very well socially here in Los Angeles, but we can't even pay our rent. And so I said, where's the Watchtower Society getting its money? And I'm saying that in front of the governing body, all 4 sitting here at dinner. And they knew that this young Greek guy was in charge of finances, and he was the one that would know. And so he said to me, he said, well, the Watchtower Society has 2 corporate open bank accounts. And I said, what does that mean? He said, there are 2 banks in America that in particular that give us absolute open book on credit. Once a year, they give us a checkbook. The 2 different banks give us a big checkbook. And whatever checks we write, it's covered. No matter how much, no matter how big a check it is, it's covered. And so that's how we are able to do what we do around the world. We're being financed by 2 of the most powerful banks in America. One was the Morgan Guaranty Trust of Philadelphia, which was J.P. Morgan, representative of Rothschilds of England. So it's the Morgan Guaranty Trust of Philadelphia and the Rockefeller Bank of what was the name of the Rockefeller Bank?
I think you said Chase Manhattan.
Chase Manhattan, exactly.
Yeah, I
And
remember
this is
that.
what the young man said. He said, "We're being financed by Chase Manhattan and Morgan Guaranty Trust, and there's no limit onto what we can write. Whatever we write, it's covered, period."
There you go.
And so I'm thinking to myself, oh, really? Well, then all of the Watchtower Society's publications talk about those evil men who are running the world behind the scene, and the whole world is lying in the power of the devil. And we are major religious movement in America, and we're getting financed by the Rockefellers in New York and the Rothschilds in England. And then in the one of the very old watchtowers, original watchtowers back in 1869, 1870, one of the original watchtowers had a whole article about Charles Tez Russell, the founder of the IBSA, International Bible Students Association, who later became known as Jehovah's Witnesses. But there were articles in the early watchtowers about how he went to England to visit the Rothschild, old man Rothschild, and he went to England to meet with Rothschild, and the two of them went to meet with the Prime Minister of England at the time, and it showed them on the boat together, all waving on the boat that they were going to England to meet the Rothschilds and the Prime Minister of England. This is Charles Tez Russell. And where does he come from that gets this kind of clout? Well, as it turns out, he was put into a position, Charles Tez Russell was picked to promote a political philosophy that would prepare the working class people of the world, the poor working class, uneducated people of the world, to present to them the idea that there's going to be a new world order. There's going to be a whole new government where all the governments in the world are going to be overthrown, and God is going to bring about his kingdom on the earth, and he's going to be the leader of a new world order. And boy, now I look back on that, I know where all of that has come from. It's occult Freemasonry and MI5 and MI6 out of London, and the connections with the British Israel World Affairs, British Israel World Federation. There's some very dark stuff going on politically that's been going on for hundreds of years, going all the way back to the British East India Company in India, and how we humans have been led down the garden path to accept an organization that is supposedly going to represent a new world order. And it's incredible how much we have been bought and sold and bought into and lied to. So, and we're not the only ones. Jehovah's Witnesses are just one of a group of Masonic orders. The Worldwide Church of God, British Israel Worldwide Church of God, the Seventh-day Adventists, the Mormons, and then the Masonic orders, the Blue Degrees of Freemasonry. It's really quite a story when you see how the world has finally come down to us today. And this is why I don't think there's any hope for the human race, because most people have not even thought about the world they live in, and they're not interested to hear the truth. But we just keep doing, you and I just keep doing what we're doing and hoping that somebody will listen. And now it begins to appear that maybe there is a movement around the world of people who are finally waking up. And boy, I'm thinking it's about time, because when you find out what's really been going on in your country, and the connections behind the scenes with international banking cartels in the underworld, organizations of Mafia and La Cosa Nostra in Europe and Mafia in America with the international banking cartels, and the rise of communism, Nazism, fascism, all of these things are being financed along with Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, and the whole entire superstructure of Western civilization being organized, directed, and financed by big money. And quite a story.
Yep, all the 501c3 organisations, prostitutes, whores, under the umbrella of Babylon the Great harlot, who sits on many waters of religious blasphemy, and they all have their 501c3s, all good little Christians registered with the good old government run by Satan and his demon hordes. That's how...
right, and that's why... And that's why if you're going to get married, you have to get married, even in Jehovah's Witnesses, you get married with the official imprimatur of government on you. Everything is official, governmental, registered with Jehovah's Witnesses. And they even say that the elders say, with the authority invested in me by the government of the United States, implying that, God gave you authority. No, we got Caesar's authority. And so we're part of the world. And it's an incredible story, Santosa, and people like you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, it is staggering, brother. I did 30 years with the Witnesses, and I was absolutely zealous. I was a ministerial servant, regular pioneer, doing 90 hours in the field service every month. I served in Portuguese-speaking congregations, Italian, Spanish, French, because I was a linguist and I thought I'd use my languages in service to Jehovah. I went and preached to the unassigned territories of Aboriginals in Central Australia.
Wow.
And
it's been around.
So I know what it's like to be brainwashed. I know what it's like to be seduced by these powerful organisations.
Yep.
None of them escape the fact that they're all in bed with Babylon the Great, the harlot, with their 501c3 registrations. Therefore, and I point this out to all these churchgoers, I ask them, is your church registered with the government? Is it a 501c3 church? And they can't deny that it is, and therefore the conclusion would have to be that you're not doing God's will, you're doing the government's will. You have to. And and
if you weren't, you wouldn't even get your license to operate. Remember, you have to have a license to be a minister. Well, who gives you the license to be a minister? The government gives you the license to be a minister. The government gives you a license. It's that alone should call into question who's really in charge on this earth, God or man? Because government. One teacher I had many years ago, he said something very interesting. He said, when you speak truth to power, at the end of the day, eventually at the end of the day, when you speak truth to power, at the end of the day, you will still have the truth, and they will still have the power. You speak truth to power, power doesn't give a damn about the truth. And that's why all the things I talk about how the world really works, I don't do any of it because I realize it doesn't matter if you know how the world works. You don't have anything to do with it at all because they run the show. They have the guns, they run the show, and they are nothing but liars and criminals. The governments of this world are made up of liars and criminals, and therefore you have to be a fool to involve yourself in the business of this world. It's an incredibly bad situation. I know how things work, but I'm not about to use that knowledge because I know the government, they find out if you know how this thing really works, they're going to come after you. They're going to throw you into prison, and you probably no one will ever hear from you again because they don't really